All right, we're back for episode 2 of Bench Racing After the Flag. Our new web series. We're really lifting the curtain behind a lot of the drivers in Ontario that maybe we don't know their backstories, or we haven't talked enough about their backstories. Right now, I'm here with former Sunset Speedway Mini Stock track champion out of Holland Landing, Ontario. It is Warren Paxton here at the KP Motorsports BYFC Racing headquarters. And Warren, you sort of popped up on the scene out of nowhere and really, literally started winning races as soon as you hit the track. No one had really heard of you, and you really established a name for yourself fairly quickly. Let's go right back to day one. Did you think that you would have the start to your racing career that you did?
No. I when the idea first came up about, maybe we should have a race car, and well, are we going to build our own, or are we going to, try and find something that's partway built? And I had the opportunity to go and look at a few different cars and kind of bounce some ideas off of friends and family members about maybe we could build one. And actually, it was through a coworker at the time that I made the connection with Todd Lochnan out of Sauble, and even that the deal didn't come together right away. It was something that kind of took a little bit of time, and I just kind of followed along with it. But I knew that we would have at least a car that was capable of being competitive, but I didn't expect to come out and enjoy some of the quality racing that we had right out of the box.
Now, so let's go back even further than that. That year, that was what, 2007?
2008.
2008. So, despite the fact that no one had really heard of Warren Paxton prior to you purchasing a mini stock, it's not to say that you did not grow up at the racetrack, grow up around racing. Your father, Ken Paxton, owned Paxton Automotive. Paxton Automotive was a figure in racing up in this part of the province for a long time. Your father raced himself, so you were always really immersed in this culture before you ever strapped into a car yourself.
Yeah, in some ways, I guess I was immersed in it. My father had finished his career racing stock cars before I set foot on the earth. But like you said, he was involved. Paxton Automotive did do work for a few different drivers over the years that were racing at Sunset. I know that in years past that we had supported the program with the business as well. Paxton Automotive was often on the page where the point standings were in the program. But we weren't there every week. It might be a kind of a 2 or 3 times a year visit sort of thing, and always really enjoyed it. And it was a good time. Kind of followed a bit of racing on TV, but it wasn't something that was forced on me. It was something that I kind of caught on to a little bit, and over time really thought that this is kind of fun. Maybe this is something for me, and that kind of pushed us along into starting our own little program up.
Now, despite the fact that you weren't thought of when he was an active participant in the racing program at Sunset, well, I'm sure you've seen photos, you've heard stories. What he raced at Sunset, I understand. What divisions did he compete in?
Yeah, it would have been like a street stock at that point in time. So, there was no mini stock at that point in time. There wasn't really a 4-cylinder division. So, he and a few of his friends at the time, names that pop up, people that he mentioned that he used to race with, the likes of Mark Dilley, Peter Gibbons, Grant Morning was another local guy, a good friend of his that did some racing there as well, and Doug Corbin. These guys were and still are good friends of his. So you get to see Mark fairly frequently, and then obviously he has other friends that he made at the racetrack, and that's one of those things that, going into it, was like, the racing thing would be neat. It's like any other sport. You make some friends, you kind of make some connections, and it's a good thing socially as much as it's competitive all at the same time.
Yeah, when you see your dad and he's at the racetrack talking with people, he's got friends that he met 27, 28 years ago that he still sees now. So he would have raced around 84, 85, something like that?
Yeah, actually it was even prior to that. It was like right around coming into 1980, like right around that time, so early 80s. But actually, I got kind of enlightened more than ever about his racing career. I would have been, it would have been the year prior. It would have been in 2007. I ended up going on a racing excursion on a trip down to Michigan to the NASCAR race with my dad and a few of his friends, which were competitors back at the time when he raced. and spent the weekend basically listening to stories about when so and so did this and this happened, and just seeing the way that they carried on and were so passionate and excited to tell these old stories. And I think that's one of the things that kind of spurred me along. And then it was almost exactly 12 months later that I finally made a deal to secure a car of my own. But I think that had a lot to do with it, to hear all the excitement coming out of what they had and their stories to tell from the past. And I thought, that maybe I want to be a part of that, and maybe I want to have stories like that to tell one day.
Now, were you around? Can you remember being around Paxton Automotive when he was working for some of the racers up at Sunset Building Motors?
Yeah, not really in a whole lot of detail, and certainly not with the understanding that I've picked up over the years now of being around race cars and engines and everything else. But actually at the time and even into my later teens, I really didn't have a whole lot of interest in automotive in general. Cars and that type of stuff really wasn't of a huge interest to me. And then I guess just before I turned 20, got into some part-time jobs that kind of sparked a bit of an interest, and ended up going through at Georgian College at the Canadian Automotive Institute, excuse me, and got my bachelor's degree in automotive management. And all of a sudden now I'm immersed in something that I really didn't have a whole lot of involvement in, or a lot of interest in anyways, in the earlier part of my life. So it's kind of funny how that all played out.
So to say that he didn't force it on you, I'm sure he greeted the venture with open arms when you expressed an interest in getting into the mini stock division.
Yeah, he did, and all at the same time though, it was about, okay, we're going to do this and have fun, but there's racing but there's life too, and it as much as racing is a commitment and it is a lifestyle, it occupies a lot of your time. We'll get involved and we're going to go out there and we're going to do everything we can do to be competitive, but we're not going to let it overtake all of what life has to offer. So it was nice to have that, because I can imagine that because of the competitive nature, it's very easy to become totally immersed in it, and that's your primary focus. So it's nice to be involved in racing, and I think that's part of the reason maybe why I've been a little bit reluctant to move up to another division, is I'm having fun doing what I'm doing. It's not costing an exorbitant amount of money, and I'm still having fun. And I've always said that as long as it's fun, I'm going to keep doing it. So the day that changes, then that's probably when you'll see me step back and hang it up. But until then, we'll still be there having fun.
The moment you stop having fun with it, you'll be done with it, right?
Absolutely.
Now, when you see the way that your dad sort of brought you along, with the baby steps, and we're going to do this, we're going to have fun, and maybe not going balls to the wall right away and spending a pile of money. When you look on the other side of the coin with a lot of the young stars in this division, and I mean right now, really and truly, I believe this is the golden age for mini stock racing. I think in 10 years we're going to look back and say wow, look at all the talent that was racing in the mini stock class all around the province. And I mean, you really can't pick one track. There's a bevy of teenage talent, young teenage talent all over Ontario. When you maybe look at how the interaction goes with some second and third generation drivers, do you think it's easy sometimes for parents to push their kids a little hard and maybe forget that there's life outside of the speedway?
Oh, I think that does happen from time to time, and I mean it's just like any other sport. I've been involved in hockey for years. I officiated hockey. Well, one of the things you got to see doing that was, sometimes people get just a little too excited, a little too passionate, and they force something on their kids, and maybe that even goes so far as to then alienate them from it, and they don't no longer enjoy it. So it's nice to have been kind of mentored through it the way that I have been, you're right. We definitely are at an age right now where there's a lot of talent and there's a lot of good equipment out there. People that aren't afraid to spend some money, and I mean, being brutally honest, I mean, it's racing, and you're going to have to spend some money. The days of kind of just assembling a car that whether it's come right off the street or it's come from a scrapyard or whatnot, the days of just assembling something, going out and racing and being competitive out of the box, I think are pretty well done. They're not happening right now. It's just not a possibility. But will that swing back around? Yeah, it might at some point. But the competition level right now dictates that no, that's not even an option.
I mean, that's where we might need what a street stock is to a Thunder car. We might need that for the mini stock. I mean, I thought the 4 Fun division when it was at Sunset was phenomenal. I think that, maybe we needed the safety aspect boosted up just a little bit, but we were fielding at the end 40-something car fields every single Saturday, and we had a lot of guys start out in the 4-Fun division and move up, and I strongly think that that's something we need to get back to.
Yeah, actually, the year that in 2008 when I started racing, that marked the end of the 4-Funs. Yes. They had finished up at the end of 2007. I think you're right about the safety aspect of things. That's something that needs to be paramount in any level of racing or competition of any kind. But if we could get that rolling, that would probably be a good thing. I know. I guess it would have been 2009. They also tried doing the mini stock outlaw deal.
Yeah, that failed miserably.
Right. So I mean, it's hard to say. I guess what we're kind of looking for within a 4-cylinder division, if you will, is maybe a tier. Make it a 2-tier level, or maybe even multiple tiers if that's what's needed. That so that it drives competition at all levels. So if you have some entry-level drivers, I mean, coming in now as an entry-level driver, you got your work cut out for you. But maybe if we tiered it, so after, I don't know how you'd base it. That'd be the toughest thing, on experience or race number of races won, or it would be very difficult to do that. But I'm sure that if a bunch of people got together, we could make some decisions on that. But a second or third division would be a good thing to help encourage people that may otherwise go, I can't walk into this division. Look how competitive it is. I'm not even going to have a chance, so I just won't bother.
Especially when you look at going from a mini stock to a Thunder car or a super stock, that's not a jump. That's a chasm. That's a Grand Canyon. It's crazy. Yeah. The knowledge that you accrue in mini stock. I'm not a driver, but from what people have told me, so much of it it's just not transferable to a super stock. The equipment's obviously not transferable. You really need to start your program all over again if you want to move from a mini stock to a super stock the way things are right now.
Yeah, and a lot of drivers that you talk to or just people that are involved in racing will tell you, a Thunder car now is a late model of years gone by, and it just it's racing, and it's the way that it goes. We're always in the pursuit of something better, so things are always changing, and there's something newer and better and lighter and faster, and that's, I think, what drives a lot of us to keep doing it. That's the exciting part about racing, but at the same time, it really creates a divide in over time.
So let's go back to your first night at the track. You debuted at Flamboro's Oktoberfest, which at the time was the last show on the schedule, if I'm not mistaken. It was after Autumn Colors, and that was when Frostfest didn't exist.
Right, there was no Frostfest.
So it was just Oktoberfest. You show up in a car still lettered up like Todd Lockton's, if I'm not mistaken. It was still number 13.
We left the numbers. I peeled off his sponsor decals only because I thought that was out of courtesy, not being the same driver that those sponsors had committed to. We put a couple of our own on, and the paint scheme. To anyone else, at a quick glance, it looked like it was TJ down there. But it was pretty wild. I guess it came to the shop. Not our shop. I was working at the Honda dealer, Blue Mountain Honda, that's been sponsoring us right from the beginning. We brought it over to the shop from over near Owen Sound, hauled it over. The engine was done. It had a connecting rod in it like a hockey stick. So we spent a couple of nights after work, got enough parts assembled that we could just get it back together. Kind of just thought, let's see what we can do. We'll get it enough that it'll run well, and just so we can go out and turn some laps, right? And we're not going to have to sit on it all winter. And of course, being at the time, I was pretty excited about it, so I didn't want to have a brand new car that I couldn't then use until April or May when the season opened up. I wanted to get out there right away, so we got it together quickly. Just slapped some sponsor decals on it, and I guess it was probably about 3, maybe 4 nights leading up to not Autumn Colors, to Oktoberfest, and then hauled down on the Saturday morning. And from the first practice when we went out, it was pretty obvious that we actually had something. And I had a few drivers kind of come to me, and kind of like you said, people were going like, who are you, or where did you come from, or what's this car all about? The questions were flying fast and furious in all directions. But it was a pretty cool feeling to be able to take something that, like I said, I had kind of scouted it out and knew that the car was competitive, but I still didn't expect to go down there and have something that, all of a sudden it was becoming reality that maybe this thing, really could be a contender. Like maybe we got a chance at winning a heat race or something.
So how many weeks passed between hearing about this car through a coworker, picking it up and taking it to Oktoberfest? Because if it was a week between it coming to Blue Mountain Honda in Collingwood and then getting towed to Oktoberfest, I mean, how much time passed between you even knew that this car existed?
Prior to that, maybe a month and a half. I had kind of been given a tip that maybe Todd was looking at moving into a different division, and the car might be coming for sale. So I had contacted him, but he had dug his heels in. No, I want to hang on to it. I don't know what I'm doing yet, so I think I'm going to hang on to the car. And so I took that at face value, and went and looked at a few others, as I mentioned, and we went and looked at a car that was partially built. It had a cage in it, but still had a lot of work needed to be done to it. And we were driving back from there, and I looked at my dad across the truck, and I said, maybe I should just give it one more shot. And so I called up TJ, and it was on a Sunday, I can remember, and it coincidentally, the Sauble season had just wrapped up, so that would have been the Labor Day weekend.
Labor Day weekend, yep.
And on the Saturday, and so I called him up, and I said, I'm not trying to hassle you. I know I called you a couple times, but I've got a car that I think I'm going to move on, unless yours is really the one I want. And he said, well, your timing's perfect, because he says I blew it up on championship night last night, and I'm a little upset about it. You can insert whatever words you like there. But, he says, if you want it, come make me a deal, and we'll do it. So that's kind of the way it played out. But yeah, it was probably probably 6 weeks, and that would have been maybe 2 or 3 weeks left in the Sauble season at that point, right? So it kind of materialized fairly quickly. I actually had never seen the car run around the racetrack. I saw a couple of videos and stuff, but I had never been to Sauble Speedway at that point. So it was a little bit sight unseen. However, the contact that I had helped TJ a bit with the car, and had a pretty intimate knowledge of it, and it was a guy that I trusted, so I felt pretty confident that we were going to have a good piece, and we did.
Do you feel that maybe people getting into the sport right now, that it's a mistake to build your first car, that you should go out, buy one, make your mistakes as a driver there, and then learn what you like and what you don't like, and then build your own project?
Well, I guess there's kind of two angles to look at this. Like, obviously I bought my first car. I have another car, which we built from the ground up.
Which was a pile of fun.
Yeah. However, I guess where I'm going with this is, it's nice to have a car that you can jump in and go, especially if it's competitive. And I think I know it got me started off on the right foot, because your excitement level's incredible at that point. I was like, wow, I got a car and it's competitive, and maybe I can win some races, and this is awesome. But I can imagine that if when we built our second car, we had a kind of a template to work from.
Exactly.
So, that makes a big difference. If you're kind of going from scratch, without, most people who take on that project have some friends and some people that have some experience with it, and you would have to drive on that, because if you don't, like, you'd kind of be you're shooting yourself in the foot. It's just too easy to leave something out, or make a mistake, or just oversights, right? Things that you may not think of at the time, and afterwards you go, oh, how could I forget that? Building a car from the ground up, even with the template, it was painstaking. It went on for a long time. It's a big undertaking.
I mean, it must have been a huge eye-opening experience for your dad. If your dad's only ever built street stocks and V8s prior to this, I mean, he must not have known, what in the world to do.
No, and he told me that. I'm pretty sure, I could tell you just about every day we spent in the shop, I hear it 3 or 4 times. This is totally backwards from what I know. What do we do with this? I don't know. This is backwards. This is different. And we struggled with that a little bit, but what I will say about building the car from the ground up is we learned a ton. And now we have that to use, that knowledge to use on both cars. And I've helped it even troubleshooting or helping other drivers with things. When you work with it that intimately for that amount of time, you get a real knowledge of how every nut and bolt goes together, what bolts are going to be a pain to take out. The biggest thing, wiring. I mean, I think actually you were here once when I was, working on a wiring harness and literally had it spread out across the shop floor, only in an effort to remove some of the redundant things like, body wiring for lights and things like that we just don't need. Well, if we don't need them, let's get rid of them. Let's make the troubleshooting easier. So if we're at the racetrack and there's a problem, then we've only got the bare bones of what we need, and we can hopefully get to the solution a lot quicker than, fumbling through cut wires and trying to figure out what's what. That has paid dividends for sure, and we learned a lot doing it, and it's made our lives a lot easier when we do have a problem at the racetrack or even in the shop.
I mean, when you look at now, knowing how much work goes into building one of these cars properly, when you look at where the market is right now for how much these cars cost to buy turnkey, we're up around $4,000, even $5,000 for a mini stock. Is that too high? Or when you look at the amount of work that goes into these cars, is that just about right? Because it feels like the market has taken a huge jump really in the last 2 years or so. What guys are asking for this equipment is startlingly different from where we were a few seasons back.
It is, and the other thing to bear in mind is the asking price often isn't the sale price. So, I mean, you have to kind of take that with a grain of salt. And, I mean, knowing how much work we put in on our own stuff, yeah, it's probably worth that. Now, there's always the argument, well, you're never going to get your money out of the time you spent on it, and I totally agree with that. We don't do it because we're expecting to get paid at the end of it. We do it because it's a passion. It's something that's, it's fun. We enjoy it. There's times when we don't, but overall, that end result of getting it to the racetrack and going out and turning laps, that's why we spend the hours in the shop that we do and having fun, doing it. So the prices, yeah, I would say it's worth that, especially for someone coming in. It's a great way to get your start. You don't have to buy the most expensive car out there. If you're coming in totally green at that entry level, buy a car that's middle of the road. Go out and do some research. See if it's competitive or somewhere in the ballpark. It's probably worth paying that extra little bit to get a car that is gonna at least have a chance to contend. I did actually go and look at other cars that were complete before I bought my first one, and some of the stuff I saw was pretty scary. I looked at it and thought, I wouldn't want to ride around in that, and so obviously I walked away from a few of them. But yeah, some people would say I'm biased, but I would say it's worth paying to get a decent car, especially if maybe you don't have a wealth of resources to draw on to build something of your own.
You've run a front-wheel drive Honda your entire career. You're an advocate for the Hondas and for the imports. When you look at or when you listen to some of the second or third generation drivers with their fathers or their mothers had raced before them, drivers that are looking to move up the ladder, that are utilizing the mini stock division as a driver development tool, for lack of a better term. Yeah. A lot of guys swear by the rear-wheel drive cars because they feel as though it'll help them integrate more into the super stock and late model division. Do you feel as though there's any weight to that, or can you learn just as much running a Civic or a Neon or something else that utilizes front-wheel drive?
Well, I mean, there's things that cross over that you're going to learn. If you're involved in short track racing, you're going to learn them. You're going to learn about tow. You're going to learn about camber. You're going to learn about some of the basic ins and outs. But as far as development, I mean, if your intentions are to to continue to step and move to something a little bit bigger, more power, that type of thing, there aren't, at this point anyways, locally, any front-wheel drive divisions that offer that. So probably the rear-wheel drive would be a preferred way to go there. It gives you, it's a different driving sensation with that, and it certainly takes some getting used to. So I would say that probably makes sense. That's a logical decision to have a driver brought up from that on the beginning. It teaches them some throttle and car control. I know our front-wheel drive cars, like just as an example, if you get a front-wheel drive car out of shape, the best thing to do is don't go anywhere near the brakes and stuff your foot into the accelerator some more. If you try and do that in a rear-wheel drive car, you're probably going to be looking at the field pretty quick because you're going to spin the wheels and turn the car around. So on some levels, it's racing and it's just teaching you how to react quick and make good decisions. There's things like that about how to drive and where to go if there's an accident in front of you and those types of things. That's going to be the same in both types of cars. But as far as car control and knowing how to maybe what adjustments to make, obviously a rear-wheel drive car will react differently to adjustments than a front-wheel drive. I think that it does hold some weight that a rear-wheel drive would be the way to go if your ultimate intention was to carry on through the ranks and into a different level division, whether it be Thunder cars, late models, whatever the case may be.
When the time came and you guys knew that you wanted to build your own car, did the thought ever cross your mind to step into a different make or model, to go with a new avenue, or did you always know that you wanted to go with another Civic?
To be honest, the only reason well, maybe not the only reason, but the biggest reason why we built that other car was I had it complete here as a shell for spare pieces in the event that we needed them for the car that we'd raced and bought from TJ back in 2008. It sat for 2 or 3 years, and kind of came to the realization one day that if I ever do pull a part off of this to steal and put on the other car, I'm going to be stuck. Then all of a sudden it's not mobile, I can't move it around, I'm stuck with something that's going to sit in the yard, and that's not going to be good for anybody.
And your mom would have just loved that.
Yeah,
a decaying Honda Civic shell in her front yard would just look phenomenal around here.
Exactly, and neighbors complaining, and who knows, right? So basically I came to that realization and said, okay, well, I can either abandon this thing, like it's not going back on the road. It wasn't, the kind of car that you'd spend money on to put on the road and sell to somebody else. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to take pieces off it. It is a pretty good shell. Well, maybe we'll, take that step, and so we built another car out of it. And that was, there was never really any thought given to building a different type of car, because really we hadn't even thought about building a second car. The only reason that happened was because we had this one here. It was sitting and there was nothing happening with it. It wasn't worth anything to sell to anybody else, but we knew that if at least we had a second one, they're twins, so that we could share pieces between the two or whatnot. So that's why we built it. And yeah, there wasn't really a whole lot of consideration given to anything else at that point.
So it all just started as a matter of convenience and then turned into a months and months long venture.
Months. Oh, I'm sure we crossed the 12 months. Yeah, we were, beyond a year. I mean, not that we weren't thrashing on it or anything like that. It was a very casual thing, and we raced over that inside of that time period as well, right? So that obviously was our primary concern during that time. And then that car was actually completed during the year while we won the championship. So obviously our attention, I should say, wasn't really so much on getting it done. It was on getting, we had a good season and we wanted to get the championship.
Now your car's is it 93?
91.
91. Is it becoming difficult to find parts for it?
Definitely. I mean, 91, we're almost at 25 years old. That's a quarter of a century. So parts are drying up, and that is becoming a bit of an issue. I've kind of made a point over the years of trying to inventory myself with a good bunch of parts that I've got ready to go in the event that we do need them. And another thing is I just try to preserve as much equipment as possible. I mean, I know sometimes I'm accused on the racetrack of being, a little too passive, not aggressive enough. You could have had that spot. You could have, maybe just shoved the nose, maybe just move somebody up a little bit. And I'm often reluctant to do that because I'd rather, not have to replace a bunch of bent pieces for, the risk of somebody driving down into it and bending a steering part or that type of thing. So the parts are drying up. I've still got a pretty good inventory right now, but I've got a teammate that I know dabbles in borrowing them sometimes too, and they don't always get replaced. But hey, I mean, we work on that together, and that's cool. I mean, we work pretty good together. We bounce ideas off each other, so it all comes out in the wash.
It's always tough doing business with family, no matter what it is.
Yeah, you know what? We have fun though. It really is an enjoyable time, that we can share together and spend some hours in the shop and go to the racetrack. It's nice of we have a bit of a hobby that we share the same interests in, and it has its moments all at the same time. I can't really think of any time on the racetrack where we've really got into each other too bad, but who knows? Maybe that day will come. I kind of hope it will, because I feel like I spent the last year kind of, nipping at his heels and chasing him around. So maybe we'll have a little bit more for him this year. And I think I just got to make a point of, I look at the type of driver that Andy is, and I say, you know what, I need to be more aggressive. And not that he's exorbitantly aggressive, but I think at times I'm just a little too passive. As I said, I've been accused of that, and I don't necessarily disagree with it. So maybe you'll see a little bit of a change in that.
It's funny that you mentioned that driving style, because that's really always been your reputation, that you're a gentleman. You're not going to rough a guy up on your way by. You're always willing to help someone in the pits. I mean, you've won sportsman awards in the past. I mean, right from day one, has that been the, I'll say legacy. Legacy might be too strong of a word. That's always been the mark that you've wanted to leave on this sport? That's the way you've wanted people to see you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was always my opinion that if I can, and I guess in my own mind anyway, I feel like I had some success with that. I mean, I did win a championship, and that was my ultimate goal from the beginning. And I think throughout that, I've still remained, at least I try to be, as diplomatic as possible. And I like helping out other drivers in the pits. If they need to borrow a part or something, no problem. Come on over and we'll work something out. And as far as on the racetrack, yeah, I'll give you space. I don't want to. I'd rather spend my week making my car faster. I don't want to spend it just getting it back together just so I can get back to the racetrack. That's always been my kind of outlook on it. So, anybody is a better friend on the racetrack than an enemy. I don't want, from the beginning, I didn't want to make any enemies, because, you're out there, you're kind of at their mercy. It's not like somebody's going to come and give them trouble for driving Indy. If somebody decides they're going to take exception to it and give you a slam in the door, well, maybe you deserved it, but maybe you didn't. So I just try to be as friendly as possible with as many drivers as possible. And I like to think, when I'm walking through the pits, I try to say hello to people, and kind of, whether it's a wave or a nod, or I've like I mentioned before, made some friends and connections through the racetrack, and I think that's great. That's what it's all about.
Tell me about your first season, your first full season at Sunset.
That's the old track, yeah.
That was the old track. Yeah, you came in. Was Westgood the promoter, or was it Glenn Lloyd?
Well, actually, Westgood had it up until, at the time, I guess it was Wide Open Motorsports would have assumed ownership, and that was like Friday night, and racing started that Saturday. So it was kind of it was totally last minute. But that was. So
you've only ever raced for Mark Dilley?
I've only ever raced for Mark Dilley. Yeah, as far as promoters go, yeah. I guess
so tell me. So your first year, you're coming in. Obviously, you're a humble guy, so I'm sure you're not thinking that you're coming in with a load of hype. But from this side of the table, doing the announcing and the PR work and the promotions, you were coming in with a lot of hype. You'd won Oktoberfest, despite whatever happened over the off season. Other guys that were coming into the division. I mean, you were really one of the ones to watch, because you debuted with that big win. So you roll in a track that you've never raced on, in a division that you don't really know a lot about, and right off the bat people are looking at you as a guy to keep an eye on. I mean, that had to be a lot of pressure, no matter how humble you are. Tell me about the first season at Sunset.
Well, I mean, I didn't really even realize that there were people watching me. I mean, you're telling me that now, but I don't. At the time, that wasn't even on my mind. I think my primary concern was just, just go out there and don't destroy the thing, first of all, and try and have some fun. And we're gonna try and be competitive, and so that's what we did. And we came out. I mean, that was when there was lots of strong cars. You had Matt Henderson, who had a lot of success in the
Henderson
division.
Was a monster. Yeah, he was good.
He had a teammate, Joe Ireton.
Ireton was Colt Carconi around then as well?
No, Colt wasn't. Colt had stopped. I think Colt had finished up just the year prior, or maybe partway through.
So Butler would have been in there as well.
Doug Butler was there. Doug Butler won the championship that year.
Yes.
But I mean, there was Dan Britt started racing that year as well.
Yeah, Dan and Ken were both fast. That was a great.
Yeah, that was
great two-car team.
Ken didn't race the mini stock that year. It was just Dan. But yeah, I mean, and obviously Dan had some good stuff to derive on from
kidding.
Ken, because
Ken
had great
phenomenal.
success. Yeah, he put on some pretty good shows with Colt Carconi and some of those guys in the years prior. But we just went out, and I think I remember the first night out, we had we ended up late to the lineup lane for the second heat race, and I can't tell you why we were late, but we were. So we ended up starting scratch, and I think there was like 9 or 10 cars, and I ended up finishing third. And it was like this huge accomplishment. Like, I came off the racetrack, and I might as well, like, in my mind, I might as well have won the race. Like, it felt so good to get out on the racetrack and go out and get passing some cars, right? It felt like you were accomplishing something. When I was at Oktoberfest, the heat races didn't have that many cars in them. I started near the front. It was only 1 round of heats. And then in the feature, I started near the front as well because it was an invitational. It was just a heads-up start. So it hadn't really had a whole lot of exposure to coming through traffic. So that was pretty cool. And then I believe it was in June that I won my first feature, and that was the only one I won that year, and that was that was unbelievable. That's still a really cool feeling. I got a bunch of pictures and stuff. You know, that it's neat looking back on that. That was it's obviously a memorable one. First win up at Sunset, and then basically we chased Doug Butler around for the rest of the year. And ended up second in the points, which was, you know, I certainly didn't expect to have that kind of success, but it was pretty cool to come out. You know, Doug, even at that point, had a few years of experience under his belt, so I felt that we had a pretty good year.
Yeah, that was when Doug was really starting to make a name for himself, and you know, the Overdrive Automotive guys, which were Ayrton, Henderson, and Carconi, were sort of starting to fade away a little bit and run less and less, and then Butler came to the forefront and really dominated the division for years. Won all the big races, won championships. I mean, he's still doing that at Barrie, and he's one to watch every time he comes down to Sunset.
Yeah, our invitationals, he's got his equipment figured out. He's been doing it for long enough. He knows his stuff, and he makes it work.
So, did you run a full season the next year, or was that when you started? Because, I mean, I remember very early in your career you were saying you didn't want to run full schedules and you sort of wanted to get back to that whole life outside of racing deal.
Yeah.
I don't think, did you run a full season until you won the championship, or was that?
No. In 2010, we kind of involuntarily had a bit of time off after an on-track incident that put us out of commission for a couple of weeks. So that obviously removed us from contention as far as points or anything like that were concerned. But I think that year we ended up 7th in the overall points, and I mean there was great competition then too. That was when Kenny Donaldson was racing, Kevin Van de Beek, and that was probably the biggest year. That was the first year of the new track, so we had huge enrollment. We had awesome registration, lots of cars.
Yeah, we had close to 40 cars that
right.
year. That was wild.
You know, that was a big year. So to be out for 2 weeks, that pretty much put us out of contention. But,
and the wreck that you're talking about, though, because I wanted to ask you, it was one of the hardest wrecks I've seen on the new Sunset in the mini stock division. I mean, it was a hell of a lick. You got close to going up and over the wall to where the grassy area was. I mean, you caught some serious airtime. Put me behind the wheel of that car. You're coming down the front straightaway. Tell me a little bit about the wreck and the damage that you felt both inside the car and then the work that you had to do afterwards. Because you damn near you came pretty close to destroying that car completely. It was a hell of a wreck.
At that particular time, I can still remember being down in the pits right after we got towed off and kind of looking at it and going, well, we've got about, you know, a season and a few races in, and this might be the end. And it was a pretty upsetting time. You know, it wasn't any done with any malice. It was just an on-track thing that happened, and I can tell you I was coming down the front straightaway, and I was the third car of 4. We were going 4 wide into turn 1, which we could do now, being that it was on the new surface and nice and wide. But there was a car to my the one car that was to my outside, not number 1, just the car that was to my outside. You know, kind of got into the corner a little bit further than I think they realized, and kind of panicked and drove the car down into the turn. And at which point it caught me in the right rear corner, and this is just at corner entry, full speed, and steered me straight into the turn 1 wall. And both right side tires actually rode up along the top of the wall through corners 1 and into 2. And I can still remember sitting in the seat and just kind of like not being sure as this is all happening in slow motion, and I'm thinking, do I try and move the wheel to just get it to hop off the wall? And then I'm looking to my left and going, if that window net wasn't there, I could put my hand flat on the asphalt like this. Like, I just don't want to roll it. So I did manage, as it was still in motion, I just kind of wiggled, and it did shimmy off the wall and came down and came to rest in the middle of the banking in turn
Which
two.
is ridiculous on its own that you were able to keep from rolling this thing.
Yeah, and I can remember it stalled the car, and I tried to refire it in turn two. I was like, I'm sure there was a couple seconds of oh my God, what just happened? But I got the car refired and put it in gear to take off, and it just quit. And I thought, okay, well, I guess tonight's maybe not meant to be. So we got towed off, and it had completely removed the rear suspension on the right side. Like, it had actually detached the mount off the underside of the body, like off of it. It's not a frame car, it's a unibody, so it actually ripped it right off where the lower control arm bolts on. On the front end, it had moved, on the right side, it had moved the tire so far back that it actually like smashed the wheel arch backwards into the driver's compartment, and bent cross members and control arms and spindles, and like every bolt on it was toast, and like I say, the cross member that holds the steering rack and the engine mounts to and everything else. And I'm standing there looking at it, and it was just like, well, okay. So we winched it into the trailer and brought it home, and when I mentioned before about having connections and people with some knowledge, and I have some great neighbors close by, and all of a sudden, before the car was even out of the trailer, we had the porta power in, and we were straightening things and trying to just see what would happen. And you cut a bar, and all of a sudden things spread and move, and it was pretty unnerving. A learning experience all at the same time, but it was, yeah. And I can remember being sore for a few days, a little bit stiff in the neck. I didn't wear any kind of a safety neck restraint or anything at that point in time, and actually I didn't until partway through this year. But I can tell you that I was definitely a little bit sore after that one.
Still to this day, I'm assuming probably the hardest wreck you've been in, because I mean you're a guy that you've been incredibly fortunate, and I know that you make your own luck in a lot of ways, but I can't remember too many wrecks that you've been in. You sort of are able to find the hole more often than not. Was that the hardest lick you've taken in a race car?
Yeah, that's got to be the hardest one. I had another one that was not so much of an impact like that one, but I can remember back in, I guess it would have been 2012. There was a big wreck on the back straightaway, and it was right at the beginning of the feature, so I was somewhere near the back. and I come off turn two, and there were cars fanning every direction, so I did what I most often do and head straight for the grass. And I thought I wasn't watching the wreck, because I figured if I'm watching it, I'm going to end up in it. And I had my hole picked, and I was through, and all of a sudden a car came out of nowhere, and I think it was Tyler Dixon, and it wasn't his fault. He had been involved in the wreck and just came kind of careening and spinning out of it, and we ended up hooked. His bar, the bar in the kind of the front hoop area, I guess if you will, in the left front, actually hooked in right at my door. So it was a pretty good lick. They had to get the tow trucks and kind of separate us. That would definitely be a close second, but it wasn't. I wouldn't rank it as high just because it wasn't the same G's and getting thrown into the wall and up on top, and that sensation of looking and thinking, am I going to end up upside down here and having to find my way out? But no, that was another good one, and I remember that night really well, because after the tow trucks got us separated, we got down pit road. And actually, we were still on the tow truck, and the guy started. I jumped out of the car, and I was talking to the guys, and I have a great crew that's been helping me, and it's been the same guys right from the beginning, basically. We had the corner cut off. It looked like an open wheel modified on the left front corner. Cut it all off, and went out, and I think we still ended up finishing like 8th or 9th that night. And it was like, it just was this huge accomplishment. Like, we were in this big wreck, and those, as much as those nights, you strive not to have them, they're character building and team building too. So there's something good that can be taken from it, and that was definitely one of those nights. It was pretty awesome to have that big incident, and then come back with a bit of a vengeance.
Let's jump to 2013. Tell me about the championship season. I mean, you told me going into the year, this is going to be our one championship run, and I think that you guys have decided as a team that even if it didn't pan out, that might be, the only full-time run that you're going to take at a title. What made you decide that was going to be the year that you wanted to just get that off your bucket list?
You know what? Even 2013 didn't really necessarily start out that way. The first week out, we actually finished third on the racetrack. There were some other cars visiting from out of town, and after post-race inspection, they deemed that, or there was, I don't know whether it was totally to do with the condition of the cars or what was going on in the tech
I think it was
area.
that the Peterborough rules didn't. They were a little more advanced in the Sunset, and they didn't match up. It's not. We'll say it was the Farm Bros because they're guests of the show. They're friends of the show. We love them. They think
absolutely.
I think it was Mulders and Babin or Oosterholt and Mulders. Oosterholt and Mulders.
And
awesome guys.
I had nothing for them, and like they came prepared. Like they were rocking. Hey, again, I don't know the intricate details, and it's none of my business anyways what happened in there. The long and short of it was, we go through tech. They were in there for a little while longer, which often spells,
it's never a good thing.
It's not, it's often not something you want to be doing. But a little while later, someone walked over and told me, "Yeah, you're the winner." So, oh, okay, so that's a good way to start the season. And actually, in the first month, I think we had like 3 wins in 4 races, and so that kind of kicked it all off. And it was at that point that we decided, okay, if there's ever going to be a chance for us to contend for a championship, this is it. I mean, now that if we've won this many races in this short period of time, it's time. And it was. I actually had other plans for that summer. That maybe other weekends I had other commitments, but those all changed at that point, and we went points racing.
I mean, and when you marry yourself to a season like that, does it threaten to take the fun out of the game once you get into those long late July, August, where you're 14 weeks into the season and you start to get a little bit sick of it, right?
It's taxing because every hour, minute spent in the shop, you're looking at it going, I led from the points from the first night, and basically it was mine to lose at that point. So I was so meticulous about bolt checks and silly things like that because I thought, you're living in fear of what mistake am I going to make that's going to take me out of this great spot that I'm in. What's going to happen? Is there going to be a wreck in front of me that I can't control and I can't get around it? Am I going to have another experience like I did in 2010 that really was no one's fault, but it took me out of it. So that, and maybe that's why I've thought about this a little bit. Maybe that's why 2014 for me was a little bit. I was a little bit more of a passive driving attitude because I had become so acclimatized, at least in the latter half of 2013, to preservation, finish the race, make sure that you're not tearing up your equipment, be there at the end, and so. Yeah, it tears you up, and you're you get totally wrapped up in it, and it takes a bit of the fun out of it, but at the same time the adrenaline's going just as bad.
I mean, when you're pulling up onto that lineup area at Sunset, and you're behind the billboards and the feature ahead of you is out on the racetrack, when you're running for a championship, I mean, say you're right around Labor Day, when you can see the end of the season, when you're getting right down close to the end of the year, right down to the wire. I mean, is there just a certain level of anxiety that you don't feel at any other point, or that you haven't felt at any other point in your career?
Yeah, and I mean, being brutally honest, I mean, I'd be lying to you if I said I don't experience some level of anxiety at every race. And that's the worst time, is in that lineup lane when you're sitting and you know that it's that impending doom. We're going out on the racetrack soon. What's going to happen? It's all the what ifs, and you're rolling through in your mind. Well, what if this happens? And how am I going to get around this? And you're starting to play scenarios out in your mind. And over the years, I've come up with some little strategies for myself to just kind of distract and kind of take the focus off of all those silly things that your mind gets racing with. But yes, absolutely. You're getting down to the end of the year and leading the points and everything's going right, but all you can think about is what might go wrong, and so anxiety is huge, and I'm glad that I was able to keep that on a controlled enough level that I didn't really make any mistakes, or none that were serious enough anyways that they took me out of it. So yeah, it's very taxing, even just on the mind. Like, it's exhausting being involved at that point.
Are you ever going to race for another championship?
Not in the foreseeable future. I'm really enjoying. I just like being able to have the odd weekend if I decide that I've got some friends going to the cottage, or there's some kind of an event, whether it's a wedding or something like that. Like it's been 6 years and I missed a number of weddings, and those are things that I don't necessarily get back, right? So there's that side of it, and all at the same time, if I can be at the racetrack, that's where I want to be. Even if some nights I go and not even race. It's nice. It's an amazing feeling as a racer to go to the racetrack on a Saturday night when you would usually be racing and not race. You have this like great euphoria feeling of, wow, like I can just kind of walk around. I don't have to be at a driver's meeting. I don't have to make sure that I'm here at a certain time.
And when you spend it in the beer garden, you're giving back to the sport you love.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. In installments, one beer at a time, and yeah, but it's great. It's nice to you remove, I guess, the competition at that point for that night, and you can go around and kind of chat casually with people that you may not have time to visit with on other nights and whatnot. I mean, I know sometimes I kind of keep to myself when I'm at the racetrack and I'm focused on what I'm doing, and I don't mean to kind of shun anybody or anything. I'm just kind of wrapped up in what I'm doing, and I'm focused on it, right? So it's nice to have those nights too.
Now, you have a girlfriend who's amazing. Kelsey. I'll be shocked if you guys don't get married. So we'll look into the near future. Let's say that's going to happen in the next couple of years. I mean, is this hobby? Is this something you can continue after you get married, after you start to have kids, or is that when this chapter, call it, would end and you would look into doing something else?
Yeah, I mean, it's still kind of at this point it's kind of tough to say, but I think it would become on a level that's just less and less, and at some point, and I think we've actually talked about this before, you need to have, with the level of competition that there is now, if you're not actively participating on a fairly regular basis, it's very easy to fall out of touch with where the rest of the division is, and all of a sudden your car and your driving style that were totally competitive even a matter of weeks ago, the landscape's changed entirely.
Yeah, you're not going to unload at Autumn Colors or the Velocity and just waltz your way into the A main.
Exactly. I even think about like last year, I go out and win the feature, the first points night at Sunset. The rest of the year I struggled to crack the top 5. So I mean, everybody's kind of, it's the first few weeks, everybody's getting their equipment sort of up to speed and everything, but that just proves right there, I mean, how much the landscape can change in a very short period of time. So racing will likely there's that balance between racing and life we talked about before, and it will become less and less as like life happens and you get married and have a family, and I'll still be involved in the racing community. I can't ever see there being a time when I don't want to go up and visit the racetrack, because chances are there's going to be somebody there that I know and can shoot the breeze with about what's new or what's different, because I may fall out of touch myself. But I don't like to think about those days. At this point, I mean, I still got, I know that we're going to be racing this year, maybe not likely for championship contention, but definitely making, going to be making an appearance at the big Crown Jewel races, and of course some others mixed within.
I interview a lot of race car drivers, and I've been privileged to do this long enough that I'm interviewing guys now that I first talked to maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Now their kids are coming of age, and for every Kirk Hooker and Wade Watson and Paul House that it means everything in the world to them to have their son or their daughter at the racetrack and competing, there are a lot of guys that when they got out, they bought a boat or they bought a cottage, and their kids will never see the inside of a racetrack. Has racing been good enough to you? Has it meant enough to you that when the time comes and you do have a kid and they grow up to be 13, 14 years old, has racing meant enough to you to put your son or your daughter back into a race car and sort of reinvest in it all over again?
Only if they want to be. I'd like to think, and I mean we're reaching way out here, but as far as having my own family, I'd offer them the opportunity to be exposed to racing and see what it's all about, and tell them some of the stories that I have now from the 6 years that I've spent at different speedways across the province. And if they then take that and decide that it's something that's maybe for them, or they show an interest, then that could very well be what sparks it, and yeah, we'll be at the racetrack. But much like how I came into the sport, it won't be something that's forced. It'll be, you know, a decision made on their own or on my own, and if that's something that they take an interest in and want to be involved in, yeah, let's do it. Absolutely.
I mean, this is something that you've been fortunate enough to have your entire family immersed in it, your friends immersed in it, and none of this happens without, you know, just a bevy of support around a driver, and the people that we never get to talk about and that we don't get to interview and that we don't maybe mention their names enough. Go ahead and thank the people that have stood with you and stood behind you in the last 7 years to sort of get you to where you are and allow you to have had the fun that you've had so far.
Well, I mean, certainly first and foremost, my parents, Ken and Lynn, and you know, my sister and Andrew, of course, partway along the line, but they've had a lot of involvement in my racing over the last 6 years, and then I have a crew that's been with me all the way throughout, and that my father, Ken, and Ryan Foster, Chris Brooksbank, Brandon Johnson, these guys that have you know, have been there. Didn't matter if we were racing at Peterborough, at Sunset, at Sauble. They made the trip. They were there with us. They spend hours in the shop during the week. They make it happen, and that's just terrific. And there's other friends that I've made throughout racing that you know, that I may not have met otherwise. So that's cool too. And of course, looking at sponsors, I mentioned before, Blue Mountain Honda has been with me right from the beginning. When I bought the car in 2008, you know, it was their shop that got us all started, and that's where we got the car together. So Ward and all the folks at Blue Mountain Honda that take such good care of us, I can't say enough about them. Bruce at Georgina Auto Glass has also been a long time member of our sponsorship team, and he's a great asset and enjoys short track racing himself. And JF Kitching and Son, who's now my employer and also part of a family business, but they give me the opportunities to, you know, if I have to duck out a little bit early to get something done, or you know, that type of thing. They help us out with a trailer to get the car to the racetrack. All of these things, kind of everybody's contribution comes together, and it forms what we've got. I have a great relationship with Wholesale Tire Solutions. They've been an awesome sponsor for me over the last couple of years. CB Services as well. I mean, it's just huge. Last year we had Graham Landscape on board also. They've been you know, a big contributor to our program, and Craig and Doug up at Image Wraps have been great over the last couple of years, taking care of making sure that we got cars that are at least decent looking, and they really do a great job. I'd recommend them to anybody. So there's a lot of people that have come together, and I know I'm leaving names out and people out, but the list just would go on too long to mention everybody. But thank you to everybody, and you know, I definitely want to thank also the Mark Dilley and Steve Slaughter, who have kind of maybe even without realizing it, been mentors through my racing career. And kind of, there were some times like in 2010 where I was just kind of discouraged and ready to hang it up, and they kind of go, no, like, you know, we'll get this figured out, you know, and so it's pretty cool to have guys like that have been around racing for a long time and give you an opportunity to really have fun and grow in the sport.
Warren, I appreciate the time, man. It's been a blast interviewing you. All the best in 2015, and I'm positive that we'll probably get together and do another video interview before you hit the track. I'm excited to see you at Sunset this year, and you get to take your show on the road again this summer. So that'll be a pile of fun. Thanks for the hospitality, and I appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks a lot.